This podcast is brought to you by Gridiron Heroics Media.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Gridiron Heroics Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean. And today I'm joined by Kyron Samuels, ex-D1 offensive lineman at Jacksonville State and ex-All-AFL offensive lineman. And we are going to be recapping the NFL Week 10. So we're going to go over 5 games, including Sunday Night Football. After that, we will be joined by Max Chadwick of PFF to do the CFB Week 11 recap. And then to close out the show, we have Glenn Erby, the managing editor of Eagles Wire, to preview a little Monday Night Football action. Kyron, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It was overall a very good weekend of NFL football. My personal team didn't play. It's always a little bit more relaxing when you don't have your own team. You can just dig in everybody else. And there was some high-quality football, man. So, first things first, I think we're going to hit the Munich game. So we had the Seattle Seahawks over with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the first game in Germany, I believe, in NFL history. So, I mean, the game started with the Seahawks looking, very, very, very hyped up and kind of didn't matter. The Buccaneers got out to an early lead. The Seahawks rallied and tried to make a game of it, but ultimately Tom Brady led his Bucs to a 5-5 record and now a firm grip on the NFC South. And despite Leonard Fournette's best efforts in throwing a wild pass to Tom Brady covered by Tariq Woolen, the Bucs close out the game, man. So, how did you feel about this game? What were your reactions? We were live streaming during it, so I saw more of the second half than the first half. I'll be honest about that.
So the first thing I noticed was, the Seahawks have a decent pass rush. It's not elite. I wouldn't say it's elite by any standard, but the Bucs offensive line played their best game of the year by far. I think this game and then the first game against the Cowboys. I mean, I know Michael Parsons had a couple sacks that game, but it's Michael Parsons. Other than that, they played really, really well that game, but this is by far their best game since then. And the biggest difference was the running game. I mean, Rachaad White, the rookie, had 22 carries for 105 yards. Leonard Fournette had 14 carries for 57 yards. You haven't seen that consistency in the run game all year for the Buccaneers. And it's funny because everybody's been telling Byron Leftwich not to run the ball, not to run the ball, not to run the ball. And we've seen where it's gotten him. Brady's been throwing the ball 50, 60 times a game sometimes. And next week got a couple wins when he does that. But you look at his production yesterday, 29 attempts, 22 completions, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was one of Brady's best games of the year. He had the late interception, he was 3 away from breaking the all-time record for most passing attempts without an interception. So I'm not going to factor that one in too much. It's only his second pick of the year. Other than that, he played an incredible football game. And then the distribution was just perfect on offense. Chris Godwin had 6 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans had 5 catches for 54 yards. Julio had 3 for 53 and a touchdown. The rookie Cade Otton becoming one of Brady's favorite targets. He had 3 catches for 35 yards. Scotty Miller had 2. The 4 other guys had 1. So he's distributing the ball as well as he always has. Like I said, I thought the Bucs would get better as they got healthier. And you saw that on defense. Antoine Winfield Jr. back is a big addition for them. You notice I think Geno made some incredible throws. He finished with 23 of 33, 275 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the way he had to get that was so difficult. If you can force quarterbacks to make those throws and make those difficult, tough throws all game, which is what the Buccaneers did for the most part, you got to feel good about your chances at the end of the game. And another thing I noticed is that the Bucs pass rush is starting to rev back up too. Even just the way they're dialing up pressures. Devin White had 2 sacks himself. The rookie Joe Tyron had a sack as well. I just think they're starting to fill out. They're starting to round out. And they're getting more healthy, and they're going to get more healthy as the season goes on. Akeem Hicks was a big return for them. And if they can get Ryan Jensen back on that interior offensive line late in the season and shore that up, the Buccaneers are going to be hell for anybody in the playoffs. I've stuck by my pick with them all year just because I felt like the division's so weak. It gives them enough time to figure it out and get healthy and get right. And by the time they go into the playoffs, nobody's going to want to play these guys.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, their skill players are finally making the plays that we expect them to make. And this is not, this is not an unrealistic expectation. We've been seeing these guys do this for how many years now? Mike Evans is how many Pro Bowls and All Pros? Yeah, like probably one or two All Pros. But he's cracked 1,000 yards almost every single year he's been a pro. And Chris Godwin established himself as one of the better receivers in the NFL as well. And it's like these guys were dropping passes. They weren't on the same page. It's weird to see, considering the offense has been the same this whole time. And that's why we all expected eventually this thing would turn around. Now, I don't know what their ceiling is. I honestly have no idea. They're probably still a little limited by the offensive line in general when they face a better pass rush. But, we shall see if Brady can overcome that down the stretch. I think if you want to look at the Seahawks, the biggest thing in regards to why they struggled is because they couldn't get the run game going. Geno Smith was their leading rusher, on 4 attempts for 22 yards. And aside from that, the only other player who had an attempt was Kenny Walker, and he had 10 for 17. So they could get absolutely nothing going. And that's kind of their bread and butter. Even though Geno is playing well, they still rely on that run game to help move the ball down the field. And I think this was a little bit of a comeback down to earth. It's cool to see how energized they are. They're clearly a team with a lot of passion. They came out of halftime down and, they're giving their emotional speeches and whatnot. But ultimately, it wasn't quite enough to overcome the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And let me just see. I just want to double check who the Bucs are playing next week because they're probably about to go on a roll, or maybe they're on a bye even. Yeah, actually, I think
they're on a bye, and then they play the Browns next. So they play the Browns next, then the Saints, then the Niners, then the Bengals, then the Cardinals, Panthers, Falcons to end the year. They're looking pretty good here. I think the Bucs could finish 10-7, 11-6 here. Especially with the balance, man. They had the ball for 36 minutes yesterday. You guys had the ball for 36 minutes. They didn't give up a sack for the first time all year. They only had 4 penalties. It was their most complete game of the year by far. And they kind of squandered it late a little bit, to be honest. Like, if they play I won't say squandered it, because after the Brady pick, they gave up a touchdown, then they came back and Brady made 2 incredible throws. They got 2 first downs running the ball. So they made the plays they had to. But if they tighten it up a little bit, just operationally, that is a 21-10 ball game or 24-10 ball game that you dominated from start to finish. So that's the good thing for them. As well as they played, there's still a lot of room for them to grow. So I think they got to be feeling pretty good about where they stand.
So let me ask you this. If you're a player, say you're a Buccaneers offensive lineman and Leonard Fournette throws that interception, what do you say to him when you go back to the huddle?
Well, listen. So my thing is that I'll be more pissed off at Byron or Brady or whoever signed off on the play in the first place. We're gashing them. We're averaging over 6 yards per attempt rushing the ball. Brady's 29, or he was like 17 for 21 or something at that point. Like, he had been dicing them up. Why are we running these gadget trick plays anyway? There's no reason for us to. So I'll be more pissed off at Byron or Brady, whoever signed off on calling a play in the first place, especially if we're going to do it to Brady. If we're going to call a trick play, let's get it to something. Let's get Julio the ball, let him throw it to Mike Evans, or vice versa, or Scotty Miller throw it to one of those guys. Why are we throwing the ball to Brady? It makes zero sense. Even if he catches the ball, he probably gets decleated and taken out of the game. He's 45 years old, man. You already ain't blocking for him. Now you want to send him out on routes and try to get him taken out of the game? Come on, man.
Well, look, I'm going to defend it a little bit. It's based off of a play that they ran earlier in the year where all of the run action flowed to the right and Brady was just left out in space. So they figure they throw him the ball and he catches it on the sideline, just steps out of bounds. You know what I mean? Maybe the moment wasn't right for it. But look, if you're Leonard Fournette, you've got to know that if there's just a DB anywhere within like 12 yards of Tom Brady, you don't throw that ball. Like, you got to be aware of. I know he's a running back, but still, And just the funniest part about the whole situation that makes me laugh is Tariq Woolen is probably the most athletic DB in the game right now. I mean, his numbers coming out of the combine last year were ridiculous. So just that matchup, it just made me chuckle. And yeah, they were able to overcome it. And it's easy to laugh about it when, you know, they're already up by what, like 11 points, and then they go on to win. But still, like that. Just
Yeah,
watching that live was jaw dropping.
yeah, man, I couldn't believe what I was like. I think I tweeted out Byron why. Like, look, it could have been Tom. Tom has as much creative control as any football player we've ever seen. Him and Peyton. I don't think there's any debate. Those two have more control than anybody we've ever seen. But my goodness, whoever signed off on that, I just come on, not the time. But
All
like you
right.
said, overcame it. But I was very, very, very impressed with the Buccaneers yesterday, and I wasn't surprised. So I feel like a lot of people were surprised they came back, and they're doing pretty well the last couple of weeks. Like, the only time they've been just embarrassed this year was the Panthers game. Other than that, they've been in tight ball games, close ball games, just haven't made the plays. And now
They
you're starting to
haven't
see those
played
guys
well,
play.
though.
They have not, that's the point though. They haven't played well, and they've been in every single ball game. So when they play good or even just decent and don't shoot themselves in the foot, we get a little streak like we're getting now. I think they'll be all right.
Well, instead of spending 25 minutes on one game like we did last week, let's move along. We're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns and the Miami Dolphins. Now, this game wasn't that close, but I did want to talk about it because we got to have a conversation again about this Miami offense. I can't help myself. It wasn't even like the closest game. We probably could have spent some time talking about the Colts versus Raiders or something like that. But look, Tua Tagovailoa is playing at an absolutely ridiculous level right now. And I will still say a lot of what has happened so far, in my opinion, has been highly influenced by how effective the skill players are. I think this is the first week where I've watched Tua where he has been forced to hit some tighter window throws consistently throughout the game, and his accuracy is unbelievable. I mean, it helps when you're in flow of the offense and everything is going well, but the throws that he was making were very, very, very impressive from an accuracy standpoint. And if you're able to consistently hit those throws, you know what I mean, and your anticipation and connection with your receivers is as good as it was, then it's going to be a very, very, very challenging offense to stop. And the addition of Jeff Wilson, it's made a big difference, not necessarily in the run game right now, but if they do lose Mostert, he adds that dynamic piece that will help keep this running the way that it's supposed to.
Right. Yeah, like I know everybody wants to talk about the skill guys and everybody wants to talk about Tua, but we got to give some credit to the Miami Dolphins offensive line. Going into the season, that was by far, even more than Tua, the biggest question mark on this team. And adding an All-Pro guy like Teron Armstead, I'll talk about him in a second. And a guy like him 100% elevates your offensive line, right? But the other guys, we're on the third string right tackle. Brandon Shell is not supposed to be playing NFL games right now. And not only is he starting the game, he is dominating the game. He's only given up, I think, I don't know how these advanced analytics work. I just, read what I see. And, if it matches what I'm seeing with my eyes, I kind of like, okay, I'll use this one. But apparently he's only given up 6 pressures in his 3 games so far. And that matches up about with what I've seen. Like, the amount of pressure on those guys was insane. Connor Williams moving in the center, he never played center before. I mean, we asked the guy to do something that he's never done before. We have a third string right tackle in. We have a backup left guard in. I mean, it's just so much revolving doors going on in that room. And for them to be playing as well as they have, I mean, Myles Garrett, listen, he had 2 tackles yesterday. But when I tell you it was like he wasn't on the field, it was uncanny on either side. They lined him up on Brandon Shell a lot. Teron Armstead completely took him out of the game. And a couple times in the run game, he just completely embarrassed him and dumped him a couple times. And for my money, Myles Garrett is the best defensive end in football. You don't see that happen to him. You see him get double teamed a lot. You see him get chipped by tight ends and running backs a lot. You see them scheme him out of games. You don't see him just getting left on the island and taken care of for 4 quarters. And that's what happened yesterday. So beyond all the Tua talk, the McDaniel talk, the Tyreek and Waddle talk, the offensive line played so well yesterday. I just got to give them credit. I know the Browns' interior defensive line isn't the greatest, but they have good edges. I mean, let's just be honest. Davion Clowney and Myles Garrett were on the field yesterday. Those are two of the best pass rushers and arguably one of the best pass rush tandems in the game of football. So for them to be so dominant yesterday, I got to give them credit. And the only other thing I'll say about the offense, because none of this is surprising to me. I've been beating this horn since before the season started. This is what I thought was going to happen. 7 guys had multiple catches, not just multiple targets or not just one catch. 7 guys on the offense had multiple catches. So when you can spread the ball around like that, and your leading receiver is Jalen Waddle for 4 catches and 66 yards, and you still put up 285 yards and 3 touchdowns passing, you're going to be okay long term. I think they'll be fine. It's just about where they get in the playoffs and how the matchup goes, because we know the playoffs is all about matchups. So hopefully they continue to stay healthy and they keep going. But I'm enjoying what I'm seeing right now from the Dolphins.
Yeah, and it's not just 2 catches. It's every single one of those guys had catches that actually did something. I mean, every single one of those 7 players cleared at least 20 yards receiving with their 2 catches. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they were effective as well. It's not just, a bunch of completions that go for, 3 yards and tackle. And their run game was just excellent. Now, I know the Browns don't exactly have the best rush defense at this point, but, when you have your second running back outperform Nick Chubb from a yardage standpoint, and your primary running back nearly double his production from a yardage standpoint, and they're both getting touchdowns on the ground, like that is not a recipe for success for the Cleveland Browns. They need to be dominating the run game, and controlling the time of possession. That just is not what happened. Nick Chubb finished with 63 yards and 1 touchdown. And,
right, and most of that was on one. Most of that was on
Yeah.
one run, like late in the game, late in the fourth quarter. So without that 33-yard run, I mean, we're looking at one of his worst days as a pro, which it is his fault. I mean, guys have to block. I mean, simple as that. But I do want to give one shout out on the defense, and I'm glad you talked about that run game for a little while. Christian Wilkins is as good as any defensive tackle in football right now, and he needs more respect. But he's about to get paid. Like, if they're not going to let him go, they're not going to let him walk. He's going to be paid like one of the best defensive tackles in football, because he is 7 tackles, 3 solo tackles, which is hard to do for defense tackles. Normally you get a lot of, one arm and then they rally to come get it. You just kind of make the play and then everybody rallies around. But he's making solo tackles, and he had another sack yesterday, and he had another TFL. So Christian Wilkins deserves a lot of love, man. But like I said, he's about to get paid like it. So that's what's most important.
Yeah, man. He's in my my performance ticker. He was my defender of the week for the Dolphins. If you check it out on the bottom, he had a very impressive game, no doubt about it. And I do just want to circle back to the Dolphins O-line for a hot second. And I'm pretty sure that Connor Williams has played center at least a little bit when he was in Dallas, because there was speculation that he might be the starting center, even from some people when we were kind of trying to hash out what that line would look like. And Brandon Shell, man, I mean, I think it really depends on the situation you put him in, because he has started a lot of games for the Seattle Seahawks, and yes, was his starting, kind of a major talking point for Seahawks fans for a long time. Yeah, but he does have a lot of experience, so their depth ended up being better than what I think a lot of us expected. And as long as Teron Armstead is in there locking down defensive ends on the left side, I think they have an opportunity to be a, at least average, if not above average offensive line. I think they will have bigger challenges versus better defensive lines. I mean, you talk about going up against the Patriots, you talk about going up against the Jets, even the Bills. They have some more divisional games with some better defensive lines than what the Browns are fielding right now. Yes, they do have Clowney, but it's a kind of a top-heavy unit for them. But all right, we'll keep it tight on the Dolphins since we spent so much time on them last week, and we will move on to the. Everyone says the game of the year. It's a game of the year every single week in the NFL, but I have to admit, this was an incredibly fun game to watch. The Minnesota Vikings visiting the Buffalo Bills, game that went to overtime in a way that I absolutely could not believe. And the Vikings come away with it. They are now 8-1. And I think I know that the Bills had their moments that probably lost them this game, but this was probably the best performance overall for the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Jefferson absolutely went off. And last week I said something about Tyreek Hill being the clear number one receiver, and you said number two. Who was your number one? Was it Justin Jefferson in the back of your mind? Who was your guy that you would put over Tyreek?
Oh, Stephon Diggs is the best wide receiver in the NFL to me. And it's because of how he does it. Even though you got to give Justin Jefferson credit um, for his performance yesterday and his performance for the last 3 seasons. Um, KOC is incredible about moving him around, getting him on favorable matchups, um, just doing a lot of things to scheme him open, and he can go win. So you have to put Justin Jefferson in the top 5, in my opinion. He can go win static and go just play X receiver and then go get 1,000 yards as well. I believe that. But that's how Stephon Diggs does his. Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and DeAndre Hopkins, we should just have a whole separate wide receiver combo because there's like people were throwing Cooper Kupp in there. And I love Cooper Kupp. Played against him in college. He put some great numbers. But without me, never mind. We just won't go there right now. But it is something to be said for a guy that lines up against the number one corners and does it static, which means he does it from without getting schemed open, pure route running. He's the one getting his other teammates open where they have to go bracket Stephon Diggs, and that's why you get a guy. And I'm not saying Gabe Davis isn't a good pro because he is, but Gabe Davis isn't having the same production as a number one receiver. Yeah, it's simple, but Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, those guys to me are just in a small tier above. If we're talking about pure wide receiver play, but if we're talking about production, then you got to get Tyreek. Tyreek has his just due as number 2 right now, in my opinion, and Stephon Diggs will be my number 1. I mean, you look at his stats right now; he's 3rd in catches, 3rd in yards, and tied for 3rd in touchdowns. And you have to take into account how many people he shares the ball with on a game-to-game basis, and how Stephon Diggs does it. But going back to the overall point, the Vikings offense played as well as you could possibly play against a defense that good. And I think without those couple of plays where and those are bad interceptions, like not bad interceptions because of the decision, just bad throws. Those plays were open. If you go look at run those plays back, especially the overthrow in the second half, he just overshot it. It was wide open. The guy's sitting there in the hole. And if you can make those throws against the Bills, you have success. That's why the Chiefs have always had success against the Bills. That's why 2 in the Miami Dolphins had success against them in the first game this year. They made difficult throws in those games because that's what you have to do when you have a static defensive line that can rush with 4, get home. You can play drop 8. You can do whatever you want to do with that defense because they're so good. If they could clean up those plays, and I was one of those people that are like, I still don't take the Vikings that seriously, even after yesterday. Like, I just don't trust in them when it's money time. But if you're going to win a game every week, if you're 8-1 right now, the only loss you have is to the number 1 team in football, who is undefeated at this point in the Philadelphia Eagles in week 2. I mean, you got to give them some credit. You got to put some respect on their name. Dalvin Cook impressed me. I mean, he always impressed me. I thought he was a top 5 back in football, but the way he got that 81-yard run is probably what shifted the game and kept them alive. Without that 81-yard run to keep them alive and give them hope, they probably don't, have enough faith and hope to believe that they can get back in that game. But I think everybody does jump way overboard with the game of the year stuff. I mean, I don't think that game was the game of the year, but it was one of the most chaotic and haywire endings to a game that I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were a number of different moments where you're like, if that didn't happen that way, then this is just a different game. I think, I know it's a high pressure situation, but if you want to call yourself a Super Bowl contender, you cannot fumble the handoff, or not the handoff, excuse me, the snap in your own end zone with the game on the line. I didn't get a clear enough view of whose fault that was. It kind of seemed like it might have been the center, but like, your hands are up in there. You should not be fumbling that. That should not happen.
As a center, though, it's so hard. Like, it's so hard to blame anybody. Everybody has a philosophy on whose fault it is when that happens, or if the bottom hand is open, if you hit them in the top of the hand, all that BS. At the end of the day, it is your job to get the ball up, and it's the quarterback's job to secure the ball. So there's been times where I might have short-armed it, and the quarterback saved me. But there's been times where I hit the quarterback in the hands and he's dropped it and didn't say it, vice versa. It's just, that's how it works. Regardless of the fact, you got to get it done. And the Bills' turnovers have become an issue over the last month and a half of the season. And I felt like I was on an island there for a little while. I've been talking about it, and a lot of that has to do with my love for Tua and Jalen Hurts. It's like the way people give them so much flack and hell for almost interceptions, like turnover worthy plays. Like, shut up. But why don't we do the same for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen? So he's been putting the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. He threw a bad interception yesterday too, but Josh Allen has been putting the ball in harm's way for a month and a half now, and it's cost the team 2 games in a row. The second half of that Packers game, if the Packers had any life on wide receiver, which we'll talk about them probably later, they probably could come back and win that game. It's becoming a serious issue, and he leads the NFL in interceptions right now, and he leads the NFL in those turnover-worthy plays, so they say. So it should be addressed. I think people that are like going complete 180 on the Bills are insane. They're still one of the 4 best teams in football right now. They're sitting at 6-3. They'll be fine. They're going to get in the playoffs. They're going to find a way to get in the playoffs, and they still have one of the most explosive offenses and one of the best defenses in football. So it isn't time to like jump out on the Bills. I see a lot of that. But as critical as I am and have been of the Bills, they're still one of the best teams in football. You just got to see it. And this is my point. You can't just crown people at the beginning of the season or because they get off to a hot start. You can't ignore the signs of a team that's struggling. Same way people were with the Buccaneers. You can't ignore it just because the team's winning. The Bills weren't playing well in those games. They were finding ways to win at the end, but they weren't necessarily playing good football, playing winning football. And it always comes back to bite you, and it always balances out. And last thing before I hand it back to you, I don't understand why they didn't run the ball more with Devin Singletary. It was working very, very, very well, and they got away from it a little bit. And I don't really understand why. I hope that they can continue to run the ball and stay ahead of the chains and milk more clock, and in turn save Josh Allen a little bit. A lot of his runs aren't design runs. I would say almost every single one of them are just broken plays where he's scrambling and making something happen and taking a lot of hits, man. He is taking a lot of hits. He's taking a lot of damage, and I don't think it's sustainable long term. You got to protect your guy better than that. And if you don't believe in your running backs, you got to go get one that you do believe in that can take that pressure off.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you're in the heat of the moment, it's tough to take the ball out of the hands of your best player and one of the best players in the league. But I think you have to be able to. I mean, that's an awareness that you need to be able to maintain throughout the course of a high tension situation. I mean, I just watched a play where, he scrambles up the middle. It's a huge gain. And then instead of sliding, he basically takes a scissor hit, like he gets hit low from one side, high from the other. And he's so big, he doesn't fly through the air because he's Josh Allen. He just, takes the hit and goes down. But that's like, when you're already maybe not making the best decision to play him in this game. I mean, look, he obviously was able to perform, but what does that mean long term for him? You know what I mean? Does he aggravate? Does he inflame that elbow? I mean, they've already had their bye, I think, so he's not really going to get a built-in rest week or anything like that. So I don't know. I'm a little worried about them just from a health standpoint long term. They've been overcoming a lot of stuff. I think the rush defense is something that they need to get figured out because the Jets had a really nice day rushing against them last week. The Vikings had a really nice day rushing against them this week. And that's even aside from just the one big run from Dalvin Cook. I mean, it was, it was pretty much all Dalvin Cook, but it was an effective day regardless. So they need to get that sorted out if they want to continue to be one of the NFL's best defenses. And, I will always trust their pass defense because they have the horses up front to rush. And even though they've missed a lot of guys in the secondary, other guys have performed well. I mean, I forget what was the kid's name. I think they had a corner who stepped up and had a really nice day for them too. So, again, I agree with you. Overall, one of the best teams in the NFL, and they will go to the playoffs, but they do need to get some things cleaned up if they want to be competitive and, probably not going to have home field advantage throughout. So,
which I think would be a good thing for them, actually.
Why are they playing better on the road? I'm not sure.
But just the conditions, like it's not good for anybody. People talk about the home field advantage of Buffalo. It's raining, it's snow, and it's like nobody wants to play in that. Nobody's good in those conditions. There's no such thing as being good in a snowstorm or being good in 10-degree weather. Everybody sucks in that. You saw the Patriots go up there and win a football game. I think they threw the ball like 3 times that game, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Like literally 3 times. Nobody wants to go play in a game like that. I think them having a hunter mentality instead of a hunted, thinking that they've done anything because they haven't. The farthest they've been is to an AFC championship 2 years ago. They lost in the divisional round last year. Like, I think they need a kick in the ass. Like, you aren't there yet. You look great on paper. You have one of the best players in football at quarterback. You have one of the best players in football at wide receiver at DN. You have a great team, but you haven't done anything yet. You need to go prove it. And I think that'll give them a little kick in the butt. It might give them a little adrenaline shot that they need going on the road. I mean, if you can't get up to go play in Arrowhead or maybe potentially in Miami again, or, I mean, we're looking at the Chargers. I think the Chargers showed a lot last night. We'll talk about them later, but you may be looking at a situation where you're on the road in one of these playoff games, and I think that'll be good for them.
Yeah. Looks like the Browns might be a get-right team for the next couple of weeks because the Bills are playing the Browns next week. I have to imagine that's a win for the Bills. Until Deshaun Watson comes back, I'm just not sure they have the juice to get that done. But we're going to
That's an interesting game, though, because the Bills' run defense is such an issue. If the Browns can stick to the ground game and get that back going, that'll be a fun one to watch. But, yeah, they should win that game.
Yeah, I mean, I expect it. It might be closer than others, but I don't know. Look, I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones had a good week, so we didn't even highlight him when we talked about them, but he had a nice game, and I think he's emerging as a legitimate starting receiver in the NFL, but just want to give him his credit for a second. And then I think the Vikings are on a bye, and then they will be back the following week to play the New England Patriots. So we shall see. We shall see what happens with them. Moving on, we are going to take a look at America's game of the week. And, it was a good game, but did you know this? Did you know that I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but they actually cut away from the Bills Vikings in overtime to go to the Cowboys Packers on Fox?
Yeah, well, I'm in a group chat with a bunch of other like media guys and whatnot, and then we were in there all day talking about it because we're sending stuff and helping each other out and whatnot. But like 2 or 3 of them start like freaking out. They're like, "Oh my God, they switched the game off! They switched the game off!" I'm like, "What are y'all talking about?" Because my games are locked in the way I watch my games. Like, I guess it's just regional. I have no idea, but my TV was locked on that one the entire time. But they were freaking out about that, and I can see why. But listen, man. Jerry's boys pay the bills. Let's just be honest, man. Like, the Cowboys are still the most profitable, most recognizable team in the United States of America, and probably the most recognizable football team in the world, to be honest. So it doesn't surprise me, but it's funny to see. It was funny to see the reactions.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised because so I have NFL Plus or whatever, and but I was watching through Spectrum. And right when they hit overtime, they cut away. I was like, "What the heck?" So I was able to just watch it by flipping over to the NFL Plus subscription. But then you're watching it on a dinky little iPhone. It's regional, I guess, but it's just TV rights, and I'm sure that there are at least a few people out there who miss watching the closing of that game live, and I can't imagine that was fun.
Yeah,
but,
that sucks.
All right, to the game itself. The Green Bay Packers spoil Mike McCarthy's homecoming. He shows up dressed like do you see that? He shows up
just like Lombardi.
Yeah. Just like, what are you doing, man?
He's trolling. He's trolling. He's
I
trolling
know.
with those play calls too.
Yeah. But it's like it didn't work out. And this is like I think this is one of the reasons that people don't take you seriously, man. Like you've been winning and you go and it's a national spotlight and you get beaten and it just makes you look foolish. It's just this is why you're probably not in Green Bay anymore, aside from the fact that Aaron Rodgers doesn't like you.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think the end of the day, are we going to go ahead and just get into the game?
Yeah, man, just go for it.
At the end of the day, the get rid of Zeke crowd looked a little crazy yesterday because they definitely needed Zeke for one. And for two, Dak Prescott shows you who he is again yesterday. Dak Prescott is a good quarterback. He's a guy that at his best can make some of the best throws when he's on time and when he's in rhythm. He can make the plays, but he's always in big games. I can't think of a big game where he didn't have multiple turnovers, where he didn't, relatively crap the bed when it was money time, or give a team hope when they could have put them away, which in my opinion is money time as well. We talked about it with the last game. If the Bills get a 3 and out and stop that 81-yard run from happening against the Vikings, that team doesn't come back. They don't have hope. They put them away. They bury them right there. I think the same can be said for Dak and some of these turnovers when you get these teams down 14 points. Instead of giving them life and giving them a chance, giving them hope, put them away. Take care of the ball. And that's when you would need a Zeke or a guy that you trusted a little bit more to pound the ball, get those tough yards. I think when you look at it from a macro perspective, this is why I still have a lot of faith in Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because they have the quarterbacks who don't beat themselves. I know he had a rough game last week, Aaron Rodgers, that is, but that was still like in the red zone going in to score touchdowns. Like, it wasn't like they weren't moving the ball. They've been ineffective. You look up and look at Aaron Rodgers' stat line now. He's number 8 in passing yards. He's tied for 5th with 17 touchdowns. He has seven interceptions, but he's still playing as good as any quarterback in the NFL with very limited weapons. But we saw the emergence of Christian Watson yesterday, the first-round pick out of North Dakota State. Second-round pick out of North Dakota State. And it wasn't fluky. Those plays have been there all year. He's been running free and running by guys all year. He just hadn't relatively made the plays and been consistent there. If he can develop into a legit number one, if he can develop into a legit over-the-top downfield threat, then Sammy Watkins and Alan Lazard are more than sufficient number 2 and 3 just to run intermediate routes, short routes, out routes, get those tough yards on those third downs. That's more than fine for Aaron Rodgers to win football games with. And then you got to give a lot of love to, the running backs, Jones and Dillon. They combined for almost 200 yards themselves. They did. They combined for 203 rushing yards and a touchdown themselves on only 37 carries. So incredible efficiency in the run game. And like I said, I just keep going back to it. This is why I trust the Packers. This is why I trust the Buccaneers, because other quarterbacks will find a way to give those two guys a chance. And when those guys have a chance and those guys have the opportunities to win ball games in the crunch time, more times than not, they always come through. So I have a lot of faith in them. I think they can still squeak in at a wild card because the NFC isn't necessarily – I think it's a very solid conference. I think it's way underrated. People talk so much crap about the NFC because the AFC is more flashy. But you look at those NFC trenches and where it really matters and those NFC running backs, that's where the bread and butter is. But I think the Packers should feel very, very good about where they stand. It's going to be interesting for them. They play the Titans next week, and they play the Eagles the week after that. If they can win those 2 ball games, or even split those ball games, then they play the Bears, the Rams, the Dolphins, the Vikings, and the Lions. There's probably about 4 or 5 wins there left for them. If they could squeak out one of those next 2, which I think they very well could, it'll be interesting to see the Packers the rest of the way because they're starting to find a little bit of life the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think their defense is improving, as time goes on, and the offense obviously didn't put them in as many bad situations this week. But Rudy Ford coming in, making his 2 interceptions, and that the talent of that defense it's pretty impressive. They just need to come together. But let me ask you this: I'd like some details on why you say what you say about Zeke being missed in this game, because I will tell you the narrative is obviously not that, because they're 1 yard short of 160 yards rushing on the day. Tony Pollard over 100 yards, 115, 5.2 average per carry, and a touchdown. What is it about Zeke being out that you would say held them back in this game? Yeah, I understand there's probably some situational stuff where it would have been nice to have a bigger back, but beyond that, why exactly is he the missing piece for them potentially winning this game?
Because you control the clock better. You situationally you get those third and shorts that they were starting to fall behind on. You get instead of they ran a lot early in the early downs with Tony Pollard, and he wasn't effective in the early downs. That's where Zeke has been getting you 2, 3, 4 yards, and you're ahead of the chains. Pass protection. He wasn't terrible, but there was a lot of times where there's leakage of pass protection. Red zone. It's just so many things where Zeke comes into play and that Tony Pollard's not effective at. He had 22 carries. I can't think of I think it's been one other game where Zeke has had more than 18 carries. The opportunity is also something that we need to talk about. Malik Davis had just as much yards per carry. I mean, we need to start giving the offensive line a little bit more credit, one, and we need to start giving Zeke a little bit more credit, two, because of how they get it done. You look at I'm trying to pull up the time of possession here, but I can't see the TOP. Do you have the time of possession by chance?
Not pulled up on me right now.
Okay, never mind. I just got it pulled up. Time of possession. The Packers had the time of possession 35. I know they went to overtime, so they kind of muddled it a little bit. But the Packers had 5 more minutes of time of possession. With Zeke, and you're able to stay ahead of the chains and get those first downs and keep it moving, you get to stay ahead of the chains and bleed more clock and keep those guys off the field. Or you don't have to worry about dropping back with Dak as much and relying on him as much. It is all encompassing when you talk about Zeke. And it's hard to – I wish we had a film where we could break it down, because there's like 3 plays in my head where I can see them, but I can't explain it without having a visual here.
Mm-hmm.
But especially it's the way they play you too. It opens it up for so much. Without CeeDee Lamb in that game, that could have gotten ugly for the Cowboys offensively, because he just went out and made plays. Those plays weren't necessarily wide open, schemed open. CeeDee Lamb just had a whale of a game. And I need to give him some more credit and respect too, because I've always considered him a good football player, but never in like a maybe borderline elite tier. But I mean, you can't deny him for much longer. I mean, he's sitting there right now. He's 10th in catches, 9th in yards, 9th with 5 touchdowns, and that's with Cooper Rush, who did a damn good job for what he is. But that's with Cooper Rush playing quarterback for 5 games. But getting back to the Zeke point, they're just much more balanced on offense when they have both of those guys, and you needed that yesterday. I really believe that. If they're more balanced offensively, then you don't have to throw the ball 46 times with Dak Prescott, and then you get those 2 interceptions. You don't have to worry about throwing the ball so much on 3rd and long because you're ahead of the chains. It's just situational football. It's the way you call the game, the way the game's pass protected, the way the game's played out as far as time. There's just so much that you get from him, and they're going to need that in the playoffs. They really are. Or they can keep rolling like this, and we'll see what happens. But I don't think dropping back 40-plus times with Dak Prescott is ever going to be a recipe for success long term.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of the hidden aspect to this. Pass protection, the 46 attempts. I think Prescott is better when he doesn't have to drop back 46 times. You know what I mean? And win you the game. I think, yeah, sure, 115 yards is great, but if you have Zeke as well and you're rushing the ball well, then yeah, you probably could clear 200 yards with him in there. So I get it, and I hear you, and I wanted you to give your opinion on why, despite the fact that Pollard had a good day, the narrative is maybe not quite accurate. And just to bounce off your point on CeeDee Lamb, I think it's very clear what your preferences are in wide receivers. I mean, if you got your top guys being Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and DeAndre Hopkins, that's what you said, right?
Yeah. So, but it's twofold. It's like
it's route running. Like you're clearly all in on the technique there, because I mean, if those are your guys, then that's what you love in receivers, because that's what those 3 guys are particularly good at, right?
Yeah, because regardless of quarterback, regardless of scheme, regardless of situation, those guys are going to be able to line up anywhere, any offense, any quarterback, and go get it. You can't say the same for everybody else, and that matters to me. Just being around it so long, seeing so many guys, like, you can be talented. Like, I use Cooper Kupp for example, because he had one of the best years we've ever seen statistically. But go look at how many targets he had. Go look at how they schemed him up. Go look at how many opportunities he had. Go look at the way it was at a detriment. I mean, they won the Super Bowl, but because of the defense. But look how the rest of the team suffered as far as the receivers because of that. It was so static. The offense was so bad. I hate the fact that they won the Super Bowl and the defense was poor. The defense, I'm telling you, because they scored. I wish we could go pull it up. They scored 19 points in that game, 16 points in that game. I can't 100% remember. They scored 13 the week before that against they scored less than 20. They scored less than 20 in 3 out of the 4 games. The defense played so well. And that's with the addition of Odell Beckham. And Odell Beckham was able to take a lot of the one-on-one matchups and actually help them progress and not have to worry about scheming so much open and let Cooper get those one-on-one routes. but those things aren't conducive to winning long term. I think you're seeing it a lot this year. Cooper Kupp is the number one this year. They aren't effective offensively, and the defense is nowhere near as good as it was last year, and you're kind of seeing the ramifications. The offensive line is struggling, but not bad enough for them to be 3-7 now? I mean, they're sitting here 3-7, whatever the record is, and Cooper's still having one of the best years, right? But that's just what the offense entails for him. If you can get it in any kind of situation, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins has been doing this for 10 years. He went from Matt Schaub I don't even know all the list of quarterbacks that he's played with, but he's only played with two good ones his entire career, and he's had 1,000 yards almost every year, and he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Same with Devontae Adams. I know he's played with Aaron Rodgers, but he hadn't fallen off one bit playing with Derek Carr in that terrible situation they're in Las Vegas right now. Same with Stephon Diggs.
We're getting a little bit of sidetracked here because we do have one more game to cover. But I hear you. I agree with you. I understand your preference at least and your opinion on that. I think, the reason that you're probably a little behind on CeeDee Lamb being a top guy is because he's had to develop that. He's really been an athlete first and like a wide receiver from a technique standpoint second. But he has developed and he's getting better, probably week by week. I mean, we're kind of seeing that. But all right, last game that we're going to cover today in a deeper standpoint is the Sunday Night Football matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the San Francisco 49ers. And my biggest takeaway from this game is, yes, they did win, but the reason that the Chargers were still in this game is because of the disparity of the quarterback position. Justin Herbert is so good compared to Jimmy Garoppolo that, I mean, the defense played a little bit better for the Chargers in the first half, but ultimately he was the great equalizer, which is why the 49ers went out and made that trade 20 months ago to try and never have to deal with this again, once their guy Trey Lance developed a little bit. And it just didn't happen for, injury reasons. So we'll see if it ever does. But, I mean, can you imagine what this offense would look like if a quarterback with like I don't want to say elite arm necessarily, but like a top tier arm and an ability to move in a way that Jimmy Garoppolo, he doesn't. I mean, he's athletic. He can play on the move, but he can't really like be a major threat to you on the move. He's just effective. So to me, the big takeaway from this game is the 49ers are very good on offense. They're very good on defense. But, man, how good would they be if they had a real big-time quarterback at the helm? I know you love your Gucci Garoppolo, but
yeah, like I wholeheartedly disagree with you.
I understand.
And it's not because you're necessarily wrong as far as somebody that can maybe unlock at another level, but I think that's twofold because it's kind of the Josh Allen syndrome. It's like, at what cost, though? Like, how it's same with the Dak Prescott thing. It's like, at what cost? Like, yeah, he might be able to get you 330 yards instead of 230, but look how efficient Garoppolo was. And we have to talk about, there was 3 bad drops. I mean, by IU. IU had a rough game to start, but there were some bad drops. There were some bad throwaways where Jimmy had to throw the ball away because they're just guys running right in his face. He finished 19 for 28 for 240 yards. They had 387 yards as an offense. My biggest thing has nothing to do with Jimmy. It's their red zone offense. If they're able to, they went 2 for 5 in the red zone yesterday. It can't happen. They moved the ball fine. The running game is working fine. Jimmy's hitting guys. He's actually playing better than he's probably ever played in his career. If I'm just looking at his numbers and the way he's been efficient, he's sitting at 1,931 yards, 11 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. If they are more efficient in the red zone, this team is going to be a hell of an out for anybody in the playoffs. And I think they do get into the playoffs. The division's not even out of the question for them still. But they've been to a Super Bowl with Jimmy. They went to an NFC Championship last year with Jimmy. And Jimmy didn't play bad in either of those games.
I have to go back and look, but I have a distinct memory that his performance in the NFC Championship game was frustrating. But look, I know that Ayuk had the drop right in the end zone. That would have changed things a little bit. But ultimately, it's just the eye test. It's not even the stats. I mean, when you're actually watching this game, how many of their plays start at or behind the line of scrimmage? Whether it's running plays or pass plays that are swing passes or screens or getting the ball to a guy in space. And yes, it's functional, but I also think that's one of the reasons that the offense struggles in the red zone a little bit, because everything condenses, and throwing the ball to a guy in space just doesn't leave him as open. You know what I mean? Like, the guys are able to rally to the tackle there more quickly just by the nature of everything being so condensed. I think if you had a guy who could fit the ball into tighter windows, who could threaten you deep a little bit more consistently. And I mean, I'm not saying he can't throw the ball deep, but it's just it's not a huge threat for them. And they've built the team with a lot of players who can do a ton in space. I mean, you look at Debo, you look at Ayuk, you look at McCaffrey, you look at, Elijah Mitchell, or whoever your guy is, or Jennings. These are all guys who can do a lot with the ball in space, but they are all adequate players. And Kittle, these are all guys who can play down the field as well, pretty much every single one of them. And I just think that the offense is a little bit limited. If there's a reason they're not calling those plays, you know what I mean? I do believe that they would call those plays if they believe that they would be more effective. And I think there's a cap. And I understand, they'll probably go to the playoffs. But do you expect this team, despite the fact that it's ridiculously loaded, to make it through the NFC and be a Super Bowl team? I mean, honestly, do you expect that?
If they play up to their potential, absolutely. They've done it. This is like the conundrum here. It's like you say all that, but it's like we've seen the floor. The floor is the NFC Championship. The floor is the Super Bowl. It's like everybody says this about Jimmy, but some kind of way he goes into Lambeau and plays well enough to beat Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you talk about those plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. Do you know who led the NFL in those targets and those throws last year?
Well, was it Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams? Because
it was Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes led the NFL in targets at or behind the line of scrimmage. That's just called good coaching. You have
but how many throws, how many passes did he have comparatively speaking, though? I mean, I just want to point out there's probably a disparity there.
100% probably is, but it doesn't matter to the overall point, because they're doing those for, like you said, they're doing it for a reason. They had Tyreek Hill, they had Mecole Hardman, they have those speedsters, they had Travis Kelce, where you can get him the ball quick and let him do his thing. They do that for a reason. And Jimmy has been more than, I just want to pull up his career stats. I'm looking at his career stats. Jimmy Garoppolo, for all the hell he gets, he's a 67% completion percentage guy, 1,300 yards, 82 touchdowns, 42 interceptions, a 99 passer rating for his entire career. Like, that's what he is. What is the difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and a guy like, I don't want to say that, because that's like, my point is that Jimmy is so effective and efficient. I was about to say one of my craziest takes ever. But Jimmy is so effective and efficient that you can say, I wholeheartedly get what you're saying, like maybe what another quarterback could do. But we've also seen what it looks like when he isn't in there for them. It's the same situation with Tua in Miami. Everybody keeps talking about how the receivers are this and the receivers are that. And that's true. But we saw it for 3 games without Tua. And what did it look like? They went 0 for 3 and they didn't score any points. Like, that's the nature of the beast. The floor with Jimmy is so high. There's a reason he's still there. They gave up 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance, and they still didn't move from Jimmy for a reason. I know his health a little bit kind of contributed to that situation, and they were trying to give Trey a chance, but there's a reason he's still there. There's a reason that they have him there, and there's a reason that they've been to an NFC Championship and a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. People just got to give him a little bit more credit. I'm not saying he's God, but he's good enough to win games, and that's what he does.
I hear you, but I think that, you face some attrition on the offense, and then it's probably going to be a little bit more challenging. I think the floor is the, whatever the divisional round or the NFC Championship game, as long as they've got all of these players in. I mean, just like, let me ask you this. What if let's say the 49ers, this is going to be my final point. What if the 49ers are going into the divisional round without Deebo Samuel and George Kittle? I mean, how confident are you that their floor is the NFC Championship game, even if they play up to potential? That's a really, really tough out. And I know that you take star players out, but
I was about to say, like, take Patrick. Take Travis Kelce and those guys away from. I mean, you can't. I get what you're saying, but like, we could do that for every guy. Take Jamar Chase and T. Higgins away from Joe Burrow. I mean, I wouldn't feel any better about him going into a road playoff game and winning that game. Or we've seen what Justin Herbert looks like without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. He's still good, but they ain't winning football games. They ain't scoring points because it doesn't matter how good you are if the team isn't around you. I hate the supporting cast thing because it only comes out for certain players. Like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen have the best supporting cast in football. Why don't nobody gives them any downside for that? Like, it's just honest. That's what football is. You put the best players on the team and you go beat other people. That's what you do in football. And I get it. Trust me. I swear to God, I get what you're saying. But people have been saying it for 4 years. And it's like, what all this guy does is just keep winning football games. Who cares? And this is my thing. People want it to look the same and look so pretty. Everybody's not Patrick Mahomes. Everybody's not Josh Allen. Everybody's not. There's only 3 of those guys. Tom Brady won like Jimmy Garoppolo did in New England. He won 3 Super Bowls like that. Like, literally. It was a little bit of a different time, but
it was a different time. It was a different time.
But the Patriots were so good everywhere else. He didn't have to be great. He had to be a game manager and not turn the ball over. And more times than not, that's what Jimmy does. Like, go look at Tom Brady's playoff stats in those first three playoff runs. Well, his first 3 Super Bowl runs.
I just want to say something. Okay, so I'm not that old. I'm only 32, but like, I'm thinking back in my memory. That was a specific era of NFL football that was between John Elway and after John Elway, before Aaron Rodgers, before Ben Roethlisberger. Who were the big arm monster quarterbacks in that 4-year stretch? Peyton he wasn't a big arm. He was like, he's a good arm, but he wasn't like, we're not talking about guys, you know what I mean? Like, it's just a very, very specific era to point out a guy that plays like that. Because if you just drop Jimmy Garoppolo in an era where there's no Patrick Mahomes and no Josh Allen and no Aaron Rodgers, like, you know, my opinion changes because it's just comparatively not there. But anyway, so we're about to have Max Chadwick from PFF come on to do the college football playoff. So the last thing I want to do before we jump to that is just run through some of these scores for the week. We had the Falcons losing to the Panthers on Thursday Night Football. Man, the Falcons were so bad in the first half and not great in the second half. But this was probably the worst performance just from the eye test for Marcus Mariota so far this season. I think at this point, I would try and see what I have in Desmond Ridder and decide if I need to spend a top pick on a quarterback next year. Talked about Seahawks Bucks already. The Lions beat the Bears by 1 point in a comeback win yesterday. Justin Fields was doing his Justin Fields stuff. He did have, I have to double check what his stats were, but I know he had at least 1 turnover via interception. So they still have a little ways to go if they're losing to the Lions. I think, you know, they're a little incomplete, but they're probably closer than I would have thought. I thought they were going to have the first overall pick this year. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Talked about the Browns and Dolphins already. The Titans beat up on the Denver Broncos. They don't score a lot of points, but it's another tough out for Nathaniel Hackett with the Broncos. Vikings Bills we talked about. The Texans can't do anything against the New York Giants, who continue to have one of the better records in football. You know, and everybody says pretender. Well, I mean, again, we shall see, because they're definitely going to make the playoffs at this point. They do still have some tough games versus the NFC East, but I just think that they've built themselves enough of a cushion that they're probably going to make it. Jaguars, Chiefs, despite the fact that the Jags opened their game with a ballsy onside kick recovery, the Chiefs went to town and did their thing, coming away with the win. The Saints, man, the Saints are falling apart. They lost 20-10 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jeff Saturday, man. So I have been one of the guys that, so let's have a quick conversation about Jeff Saturday, because, you know, I know you're kind of over talking about the Rams and the Cardinals, and that's the only other game that we can talk about for a second. But look, we'll bring in Max here in just a second, but quick thoughts on Jeff Saturday's win over, I mean, the Colts win, but with Jeff Saturday at the head coaching position over the Los Angeles Raiders. I have been one saying what's the big deal about bringing this guy in? You know what I mean? Like, what's the worst possible outcome? We don't expect interim coaches to become head coaches anyway. You know what I mean? This is just a patch on the situation. And I mean, just quick thoughts. What was this game to you?
Get over it. That's like my message for people is just get over it. Like, and especially like, I don't like the talking heads and the pundits that never played football, that never like been in a locker room and actually understand that dynamic, and just like going off a whim. And like Kyle Brandt, like I hate the names, like shut up. I'll listen to it from Bill Cowher, because Bill Cowher is a Super Bowl winning coach. He's been through the grind, and even though I disagree with him, it's like I can at least respect where he's coming from because he's actually lived that grind. Joe Thomas, I thought, was like totally out of pocket too. It's like it feels like these dudes are just hating because they had to like work a little bit harder to get there. He was like, well, I had to do this. I had to be this assistant coach. I had to be that assistant coach. It's like, so like, who cares? Like Jim Irsay he's going to pay this guy. They've already been bringing him in as a consultant. Did you watch the clips of him in the locker room post game, or the reactions to the guys on the sideline and how they're reacting to after they score a touchdown? They're running up to him and like push them in the chest, slapping them. Like, if they have accepted it, if they are playing, they play better football Sunday night than we've seen them play all year. They play more inspired football than they have all year. If the team and the locker room has accepted it, why can't everybody else? Just get over it. You can't do anything about it. This is what rich billionaire owners do. They do what they want. Jeff Saturday just happened to be the beneficiary of it this time. Like, that's all it is. And if he does a good job, who the hell are you to say that they made a bad decision or a wrong decision? Tony Dungy, I'll move on from this, but Tony Dungy defended Jeff Saturday, saying, and it's a little bit different because the sports are different, but the principles are the same. The Golden State Warriors hired Steve Kerr fresh out of the booth. Never coached a game in his life, never been a head coach, didn't have any experience. They're 4 championships later now, and the rest is history. Did he not deserve to have a chance? Was he not worthy of getting the job then? I know he got a little bit of pushback back then, but it's a Kent. So leave Jeff Saturday alone, man.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I am a big proponent of guys coming from unusual places to do jobs. I hate it when I hear people complain about that. I hate it when I hear former GMs complain about how, you know, John Lynch got the GM job without any front office experience. You know what I mean? I think it's just people come in all shapes and forms, and just because you didn't go through the one thing exactly the way you did, I'm over it. All right, let's bring in Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus so we can talk of some college football. And when I say we, I really mean you guys, because that is what I am. I'm here for. I'm here to facilitate a conversation about college football between two people who actually know what they're talking about. Max, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks again for having me on.
Always my pleasure. So, look, I was working the bar actually during that Texas loss, and now that like I'm in that situation again, I will probably be hearing a lot about the Texas fans, being that I'm here in Austin. But aside from TCU just continuing to roll through the Big 12, what was your take on college football this past weekend?
It was wild, man. It was a truly insane week of college football. We could officially say goodbye to a few college football playoff contenders, namely in the Pac-12. Like, now the big takeaway I had was Pac-12 is down to USC now. USC is the only chance the Pac-12 has at making the college football playoff, or else they'll miss the playoff, I believe, for the 6th straight year. Last time they had one was Washington, when Washington got beat down by Alabama in that playoff a few years ago. But it's down to USC now because Oregon, number 6 in the country, they lost to number 25 Washington, an absolute shootout. And then the shocker was late at night. I had to force myself to stay up for this because it was like 2 a.m. where I was. But it was Arizona, who is not a good team at all, one of the worst Power 5 teams, honestly. They took down number 12 UCLA in the Rose Bowl, too, UCLA's home game. So that was a major, major surprise for me that UCLA lost that game. And yeah, now that Oregon and UCLA lost, like, they were 2 one-loss teams. Now they're 2 loss teams. USC is the only one-loss team left. So they're the last shot for the Pac-12 to actually make the playoff.
Yeah, man, it was a wild weekend. And I'll kind of let you take all that. But the biggest takeaway for me was the G5 is coming, man. The G5 is
Yeah.
They're starting to wake up a little bit. You look at the UCF Tulane game. That was probably my favorite game of the week by far. Those teams are legit. You have to start taking them seriously. Even mid majors like Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina is a legit team. James Madison is probably going to finish with 8 or 9 wins. Like the rest of the country is, I don't think they're catching up per se, but the elites of those groups are just as good as anybody else in the country right now. I mean, you can even take, I don't want to call them a G5, but Vanderbilt is not, I mean, come on, we know what Vanderbilt really is. They're in the SEC by default, but they go and beat Kentucky. I mean, a good Kentucky team. Kentucky's not a great team. They're not like an elite program by any means, but they have one of the best running backs in the country, Chris Rodriguez, and they found a way to pull that game out. Purdue goes and beats Illinois. The rest of the country, man, there's a lot of parity from, I would say like 15 to like 100 is pretty damn close. Like anybody can get got on any given week. But I'll be interested to see what you thought about the SEC this week.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you mentioned that group of 5. Like that game was awesome. That Tulane UCF game was fantastic. And
old Gus Malzahn.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Gus bus is doing well right now. But yeah, that was a huge game. Like, and everyone was talking about the TCU Texas game and all the big SEC games and obviously the big Pac-12 games. But like that was a huge game too, because like the highest ranked group of 5 champion is guaranteed a spot in the New Year's Six Bowl. And that was those 2 teams were the only 2 teams that were ranked in the group of 5 that week. So now UCF is the new favorite, I would say, to make the New Year's Six Bowl game. And, Tulane was having a magical season. They haven't been to a New Year's Six Bowl game since I believe 1939 it was. So I was kind of hoping that, we could see some like history being made for the Green Wave, but you got to give credit to John Reese Plumlee. He was amazing on the ground, the UCF quarterback. He really led them in that game. So yeah, UCF looks like that the best group of 5 team right now, but there are some really good teams like you mentioned.
If Alabama doesn't squeak in, because it's a possibility if TCU drops a game, I need UCF versus Alabama in the Sugar Bowl.
Oh, please.
That's what I would like. That's actually a game that those Alabama guys will get up for.
Yeah.
That's actually, especially with the history between Gus Malzahn, Nick Saban, the mobile quarterbacks that have historically given Alabama trouble. That's the game that I would love to see. And that was, could you imagine Alabama, UCF in the Dome in Louisiana? That'd be a hell of a game. So that's what I'm rooting for if by some chance they don't squeak in. But
that'd be awesome. And, UCF hasn't been to a New Year's Six Bowl game since they started the Joe Burrow revolution, where Joe Burrow was like a good-ish quarterback at LSU. Then he took that massive hit on that pick 6. And since then, he's been a stone-cold killer for LSU and now the Bengals now. And, yeah, that was the last time UCF made a bowl game. That was a while ago. It was like 5 years ago. So, yeah, I'm excited for what group of 5 teams is going to emerge. Right now, I think it's going to be UCF.
I agree 100%. What do you think about the SEC games? Let's get into those a little bit.
Yeah, so in my preview article for the week, I said, and I got some flack for it, that Arkansas I think could put up a fight with LSU, and they did. I
thought they were going to win. If KJ Jefferson, man,
yeah, if he played, dude, I think he would. I think they would have won that game too. And yeah, they were on the 3rd string quarterback too. That's something that people don't even realize, that they were on their 3rd string quarterback in that game. And LSU, that was a tough game for LSU. And I knew it would be a tough game for them. That was great. Ole Miss, Alabama was an awesome game. Bryce Young continues to pull rabbits out of the hat. That guy's incredible. So, yeah, that was a big win for Alabama. And because LSU won and because Alabama won, the SEC championship game is now set in stone now. It will be Georgia against LSU, which is one of only 2 Power 5 championship games we know. Now we also know that North Carolina is going to be playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. So that we guaranteed to know those 2 games right now. So yeah, big week for the SEC, and now LSU is guaranteed to go to the SEC title game.
Congratulations to Georgia.
Exactly.
My goodness. Yeah, I do want to kind of touch on the Alabama Ole Miss game a little bit. I left being more impressed with Ole Miss than I was. Bryce is the best player in the country. I don't think it should be a debate anymore about who the best quarterback, who the best player is right now. And Bryce did what Bryce does. But I left being more impressed with how far Ole Miss has come as a program and how legit and how serious they are as a program under Lane Kiffin. They're about to have, the rest of their schedule, the Egg Bowl is always a crazy game, right? We can't just count that as a win. But they should beat Arkansas next week, and they should win that Egg Bowl. And even if they don't, let's say they drop one of those games, they have a chance to win 10 games in back-to-back seasons. Who would have thought that under Lane Kiffin? I mean, I am a huge Lane truther. I love Lane. I've always loved Lane. But just they don't have a lack of money, but like a lack of actual organization with their resources, the lack of recruiting talent to pull from. They have the state of Mississippi and surrounding areas in Louisiana, but they're also in competition with Alabama, Georgia, LSU, everybody else that they're surrounded. For them to be able to pluck guys from the portal like they have, for them to be able to put their defense and run game together. Everybody knows Lane for spreading guys out, throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. That's not what they're doing at Ole Miss at all. They're running the ball heavy. They ran the ball 49 times against Alabama for 191 yards. I mean, just how far they've come as a program is extremely impressive to me. And the Lane Kiffin, to other school talk is going to start piling up here soon, and rightfully so. But I just want to give him his proper credit for what he's done with that program.
And Kyron, I mean, you mentioned the Auburn is probably going to throw an absolute bag at him. And I don't even know if I would leave Ole Miss for Auburn because, you look at that team next year, they're going to be good again. Jackson Dart is coming back next year, their quarterback. Not only that, you got the best true freshman in college football right now, and Quinshon Judkins leading that backfield. He is a monster at running back for Ole Miss. This is a team that's not only built for this year, this is a team that's built for next year too. I think this is probably one of the easily top 10 teams in the country next year as well. So Lane Kiffin is slowly but surely building a powerhouse down there in Oxford.
100%. I want to kind of talk about the Big Ten a little bit too, because I just don't take them seriously that much at all. There's two teams, and I'm talking about the conference as a whole. You got to give Ohio State, Michigan their respect because they're legit contenders, right? But what do you think about the conference as a whole? I'm so down. This is the worst that I've ever seen the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's definitely down. I mean, it's incredible how open the Big Ten West is right now. There's literally a 4-way tie for the Big Ten West leader right now, which is insane when there's 2 games left. And even there's 5 teams that still have a shot at winning the Big Ten West out of the 7, and there's only 2 games left. That's insane that we're at there because Illinois lost to Purdue this week, which now puts Purdue, I believe, at the top of the Big Ten West. Iowa still has a really good shot at winning that Big Ten West too. That division is really not that good right now, and I thought Illinois was a good team. They've kind of dropped. They've dropped now 2 straight. It really is Ohio State against Michigan. The winner of that game, I think, is guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff. Those are the only 2 really amazing teams. I think I'm a Penn State fan. I think Penn State's a good team. They're not close to the elite level that Ohio State and Michigan are right now, though.
Exactly. I think when you look at it, that conference championship game is going to be a joke. I hate to say it like that, but it is what it is. And I think that actually benefits the Big Ten and those 2 teams in the big game because they don't have to worry about getting playing another week, maybe potentially getting a loss. Whoever loses that game, I think, is in great shape as well. They'll probably both get in, and that's just the nature of the beast. Even though I don't think it's necessarily deserved it, I think Ohio State has one of the worst resumes in the country, and it's just you're just putting them up there because they have the explosive offense. Jim Knowles has done a good job. The defense is improved, but I still don't think that they're. We'll see. That game is going to tell us a lot. The Michigan-Ohio State game is going to tell us a lot about both teams. But God, I feel like the regular season has to count for something, right? Even if they win that game, Michigan will be their best win. And who's Michigan's best win? Who would we say Michigan's best win?
I mean, Penn State then. It's tough. It's and then it's I agree with you because I think a lot of people are oh, the loser, if it's a close game, you got to put them in over Tennessee. And I'm like, dude, no, you don't, man.
No,
Tennessee's resume is way better than what Michigan or Ohio State has right now. They still, their resume might be better than them right now, even though Michigan and Ohio State are undefeated. That's just because Tennessee has been going through a gauntlet, and they come out on the other side. They beat LSU, they beat Alabama. They lost to Georgia, but I remember you talked about it last week. They started to come back in that game a little bit. I think Tennessee, I think their resume is far and away better. So if it comes down to, I think USC probably will get in the playoff if they win out. I don't think that's guaranteed either because they got a tough 3-game stretch coming up.
They won't win out. I'm saying I'll call it. They're not winning out. I'd have zero faith in them.
Exactly. You got UCLA, you got Notre Dame, and then you got the Pac-12 championship game. That, you're probably going to lose one of those games. So if it comes down to Tennessee or the loser of Ohio State, Michigan, I don't think it's an argument right now. I think that Tennessee should clearly be in over those 2 teams.
Right. And my thing is that I know this will never happen, but why does an undefeated TCU deserve to get in with that resume? Like their resume isn't very good either. Like TCU's best win is maybe Texas. I mean, at this point, I mean, before this game was Oklahoma State, and I don't know why Oklahoma State squeaked back in the rankings. They're not a very good football team to me. Like they're solid, they're above average. Spencer Sanders is a respectable player, but TCU's resume isn't very good as well. I hate to sound like just an SEC truther here, but it's like those teams aren't very good, man, top to bottom. And then the ACC, I think, is decent, but it's like you don't take anybody seriously from them other than North Carolina or Clemson right now.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the conference championship game. So that'll kind of sort itself out. How do you feel about a one-loss ACC team getting in? I just don't think their resume is strong enough either.
Neither do I. And that's the thing. Like I was talking to my little brother about it yesterday. And we're going through like scenarios, like, what will happen? Like how does this team make the playoff? I mean, Clemson and North Carolina, they need chaos to happen. Like they need absolute freaking chaos to happen over these next couple of weeks to, I think, have a shot at the playoff. Right. So I think they're definitely left out. I think the conversation, like I even think a 12-1 Clemson or 12-1 North Carolina, I think they're still behind Ohio State, Michigan, and Tennessee that are, whoever's 11-1 there. So yeah, I think that ACC champion, unfortunately for them, is probably out of the picture unless craziness happens these past couple weeks, the next couple of weeks. I don't see the ACC making the playoff this year.
How do you feel about ACC champion over a 10-2 Alabama team? Because everybody's like, and I thought the season was over and that it's just done, but they're going to be sitting at minimum 8 or 7 this week in the college football playoff picture because of the Oregon loss. I mean, that's only 3 spots that you have to jump up. TCU has to lose, and maybe you have to get another loss somewhere else from USC. But you think if Alabama finishes 10-2, they're just going to not move them up at all?
No, I don't think so either. I think it's clear that I still think Alabama is one of the best teams in the country. I think they've been on the losing end of some really, really close games. Now, of course, they've been on the winning end of those close games too with Texas and Texas A&M. But you look at that LSU loss, and LSU is going to be nearly a playoff team if they went out and beat Georgia. I think you got to put them in the playoff.
Yeah.
But yeah, if LSU, that's a team that Alabama lost on the last play of the game because Brian Kelly has big cojones and went for that 2-point conversion. And the Tennessee game, Alabama could have won that game if the kicker made the field goal. Right. So a lot of things that I think, they have 2 losses. So they really can't get in, especially now that they're eliminated from making the SEC title game. But I still think that's a better team clearly than Clemson or North Carolina. So I think I'd probably still put a 10-2 Alabama over a 12-1, not for the playoff, but I think in the rankings, I don't think it'll even come to that. I think the rankings, I might put them above. It depends. If Clemson or North Carolina kill the other one in the ACC title game, maybe I'll put them over. But
that might warrant it, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's clear that Alabama as a team is better than either of those teams right now.
Right. They've lost 2 games to 2 top 6 teams by a combined total of 4 points. So it's
exactly.
And this is the argument for expanding the playoff. I'm so against it. I hate it. I don't like it only because it just cheapens the regular season. Now, could you imagine how good and just sure themselves Alabama would be right now if it was an expanded playoff? They don't have to worry about playing an extra week in the SEC championship game.
Yep.
Win out, they get healthy, they get to sit back, go practice, and scheme up somebody for a month. To me, that's cheating. That's a cheat code. But other than Georgia, there's not a team that will want to play in Alabama on after a month to prepare for them. And they haven't, I hate the expansion of the playoffs. How do you feel about that? Because even as somebody who as a widely known Alabama fan, the regular season has to mean something. These games have to mean something. They lose all their meaning if Alabama can go 9-3 every year and still get into the playoffs and then probably beat everybody because they just play better when it's time to play better. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I go back and forth. I think your point is really good, and I personally like the expanded playoff. I think I don't know if I would have gone to 12. I think that's a lot. Yeah. But I think selfishly, I'm a Penn State fan. They're probably going to be making the playoff now that it's getting expanded. So I like it from that perspective. I still think the regular season is going to matter a lot. I don't think it'll be hurt as much as people says, but it will take a hit. It's without a doubt, it's going to take a hit.
Let me rephrase that. for like the elite teams. Sorry, so like the top like 8 or so teams that are going to be there every year at the end. That's what I meant. So my bad.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even like, but you think about it, like expanded playoff, like that UCF Tulane game would have been one of the biggest games of the weekend because the group of 5 is guaranteed to have one team in the playoff, I believe, in their new structure. Yep. So yeah, so I think it'll be good. And I think it'll like maybe help out recruiting a little bit and try to spread the recruit. Because right now, a lot of recruits are saying, okay, I can compete for a natty here. NIL is kind of spreading it out even more. But yeah, I think expanded playoff will be ultimately good for the sport. But I mean, the detractions you cannot deny. Like there are clearly negatives with this. But I think, in my opinion at least, the overall positives outweigh the negatives. But it is close. It's not like it's a clear cut, oh, this is good for college football.
I have a quick question. As a non-college football follower, if we're looking at an expanded playoff for 12 teams, how many weeks of playoff games is that? I mean, it extends the college football season significantly, doesn't it? Or are they cutting into one of the last weeks of the year? How's this working?
They get a bye week. The top seeds will get a bye week. So you only have one more game for the teams that are on the outside. I think the bottom 6 seeds, the bottom 8 seeds get one more game at it. And I think they use the bowls. They're going to use the bowl games as the playoff systems. So just the same bowl games, and then you had the extra games on top of that.
And what I think is cool is that the first round is going to be hosted at the university, which I think is really cool. I think that's a really cool thing they're going to do. So
that was my question, though, to you. Is like, do we really want to see Tulane go into Georgia?
No.
I mean, come on. Or and this is as somebody who went to those schools. I went to a FCS smaller school and I went into Auburn. I went to Michigan State. I went to LSU. And we took those guys to overtime. Should have beat them. All that good stuff. Come on, man. Do we really want to see Coastal Carolina go into Tuscaloosa to go play Bryce Young at Alabama? And I hate to say that as a guy who comes from one of those programs, it's just like, I don't want to say it's a waste of time because it's not. Because you still got to go play the games.
Right. And I think it's tough. That's a good point. I think ultimately why I like the expanded playoff is that it introduces the more of what I think makes college sports great, and that is pure chaos. And I think, say if you look at March Madness, where it's a 68-team field and I know the main detractor for the expanded playoff is oh, the best team won't win. It's like, dude, in March Madness, the best team doesn't always win either, or really almost never wins March Madness. So I think, it introduces more chaos, which is what I think everyone loves about college football to begin with. So if, if a big upset happens in the expanded playoff, I think that would be really cool. So I like it from a chaos perspective, but you're right. I mean, there is, again, major detractions from this. And I'm interested in seeing how the regular season is, because I think college football regular season is way better than any other sports regular season.
No doubt about that.
By a mile. So I hurting that scares me, but I'm interested in seeing how it affects it.
100%. Last thing, this is just totally off college football playoff. How do you see Notre Dame's future? I'm really, really, really impressed with what Marcus Freeman has done since the 3-3 start. They're on a 4-game streak. They're looking very, very good. And I think we got to give Tommy Rees a little bit of credit too. He came under a lot of heat, and rightfully so. He's very young, very questionable play calling. But the thing is, I don't think they have the quarterback or the skill guys yet to can Tommy Rees or to just jump all the way out the window on him. How do you think they'll go project for next year? We're already talking next year here.
Yeah, they look good, and they got to get a quarterback. Tyler Buckner is out for the season. He's their guy right now. I don't know if he's going to be their guy next year. But I made a video, actually. Their left tackle, Joe Alt, is probably the best offensive tackle prospect since Penei Sewell. This guy is dominating college football right now. Now that people are talking about him, he's a true sophomore. So he's a guy that can't even declare for this year's draft. So they could bring him back next year. Marcus Freeman, I think, was given way too much heat. And, was deserved when you lose to Marshall, when you lose to Ohio State, start off 0-2. But, he's really turned around that program. And, you look at their resume, they've beaten North Carolina. They beat Clemson, which are 2 of the ACC title teams right now. Yep. And then they also they got USC coming up on deck. Notre Dame is Syracuse. Exactly.
They beat good teams.
They've beaten really good teams. So I think this turnaround has been excellent for them. They gave Ohio State, if you remember that game, they gave Ohio State a run for their money in that game.
If they had a quarterback, and I hate to just can those kids, if they had a legit star quarterback like most elite programs do, because that's the nature of the beast in college football and just in football in general, we probably are talking about a 8-1 team here right now,
and
or
a college football playoff contender, and if they didn't drop that game to Marshall, and they lost to Stanford, who's again one of the worst teams not only in Power 5 but in the country. They're horrendous right now. But yeah, if they don't drop those two like awful losses, like we're saying, okay, they played close to Ohio State and they barely lost. I would say Notre Dame is a legit playoff team if they didn't lose those two horrible losses to Marshall and Stanford. Because, like I said, and they got USC coming up on deck. They beat USC, and it's like this team is legit. I think Notre Dame is really, really good right now, and I think they're even better. I think as a team, they might be a top 10 team in the country. Obviously, resume, you got to boost them down to, I think they're 18 right now in the latest AP poll. But like as good of a team as they are, I think they might be a top 10 team in the country. USC is in for a whale of a game in a couple
100%.
All right. I want to jump in. Go ahead. So I just want to jump in to remind everybody that in about 5 minutes coming up, we have Glenn Erby from Eagles Wire to preview Monday Night Football. And I'll let you finish your point, Kyron, but I do want to get our official predictions again for the college football playoff as we do weekly, and then any updates to the potential Heisman race. So finish your point real quick, please, and then I will jump back in.
Oh, nothing other than the fact that Notre Dame's defense is as good as any in the country right now.
Yep.
And their offensive line is as good as anybody in the country right now.
It's incredible.
They have the number one the guard in the draft coming up for me right now.
Patterson. Awesome.
I mean, but we'll move on from that. But like you said, they're playing as good as anybody in the country right now, and I just want to give him his credit.
Absolutely.
All right. College football playoff. Right now, the top 4 ranked teams are all undefeated. I think at this point, kind of expect TCU to probably close that out. We shall see. Then we've got Georgia, which everybody expects to make it. And we've got the 2 Big Ten teams that will have to face off in a couple of weeks. So, Kyron, I'm going to come to you first on this one. Who do you expect to make the playoffs? Do you expect the Tennessee to get in over one of those Big Ten teams that loses, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think TCU drops a game before then. That's what I'm thinking, and I think that my playoff has to change. You get Georgia is the 1 seed, Michigan is the 2 seed. I think they beat Ohio State, and then you get Tennessee is the 3 seed. Ohio State is the 4 seed, and that's the playoff. So that changed for me.
That's interesting. I'm going to change because I really thought TCU was going to lose this week to Texas, and now that they beat them, I kind of think they might run the table here. So I got Georgia, obviously, at the 1. I think Ohio State's going to pull out that win over Michigan. It's going to be close, though. And then I got TCU at 3. And then I think you got to put Tennessee at 4 because I agree with Kyron. I don't think USC is getting out of this alive on this 3-game stretch. So I think at that point, then you got to put in Tennessee over an ACC team or the loser of Ohio State, Michigan. So I would put Tennessee probably at the 4, which, it gives you a rematch, which I know people won't like against Georgia. But that's how it is. And they deserve to be in the playoffs. So I think that's how it is.
Yeah, they'll probably win the first round instead of the national championship again anyway. So that would probably be best case scenario for the committee.
All right. Last week, Kyron, you said you wanted Bo Nix, but you predict CJ Stroud. Any update to that?
Not really. I think this is the weirdest Heisman race in 10 years. I think the best player in the country, Bryce Young, has a Heisman moment every single week. Like, like if we're the best player, so it's like them being 10-2 kind of disqualifies him, but it shouldn't. Like, he should be the guy. But I don't think Bo Nix did anything to hurt his chances. I mean, he played very well. He had 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, didn't have a turnover. But scored 30+ points. I think you got to put Drake May as the front runner right now, though. If they can win out and he can keep putting up those numbers that he's putting up, I think you got to take him seriously now, because they made it through that tough test against Wake Forest. I thought they dropped that game and they kind of kill him out. So if it's a
front runner, that means that you're predicting him, right?
Yeah. So I'm changing my pick from CJ Stroud to Drake May, because why not? I mean, heck, it's more fun to just do it that way.
All right, Max, last week you wanted Drake May, but you predicted CJ Stroud. How do we feel about that now?
Still want Drake May. I still think he's been, arguably the best quarterback and most valuable player in college football. I think Blake Corum, though, if you're saying most outstanding player in college football, to me, that's Blake Corum. I think he's been the most outstanding player. It's just a value thing that, running backs just haven't won since Derrick Henry in 2015. Who I think will win it, I still think Stroud's going to win it. I think he's going to have a good enough game against Michigan. I think they're going to win that game. I think they're looking to give this award to CJ Stroud. So I think he's ultimately going to win it. But again, I hope Drake May wins it, or I'm very cool with Blake Corum winning it too.
All right, that'd be cool. Running back making waves. All right, Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus joining us for his weekly college football update. We appreciate you very much. Let everybody know where they can find you before we move on to our Monday Night Football preview with Glenn Erby.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me. You can find me at pff.com. I write about 5 articles a week there for PFF on college football, and follow me on Twitter or TikTok at Chad_Maxwick as well.
All right. Thanks again, man. And can't wait to talk to you next week as we near the closing of the college football season.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.
All right, let's welcome Glenn Erby of Eagles Wire. That's part of the Wire Network, USA Today Sports. He's here to preview the Monday Night Football matchup, the divisional game between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. Glenn, how you doing today, man? Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you fellas having me. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. I apologize. Good afternoon.
Well, we're both on Central Time, so we're still pre-noon, so it fits the bill. All right, so usually when we talk about the upcoming game, talk about these primetime games, we have our guests on. We like to start by talking about where the team is kind of as a whole in their season leading up to the actual game preview. And the Eagles are in prime position, man. They're undefeated at this point. They have a deep roster. They have a very, very well-rounded roster. They've got a quarterback who just keeps developing and developing and developing. Kyron here, by the way, I want to introduce you to Kyron Samuels. He is our offensive line specialist here and a co-host for the Monday show. And he has been a big proponent of Jalen Hurts. Now, maybe he has some Alabama bias there, but he's been a big fan of Jalen Hurts over the past couple of seasons and his development trajectory. So what is your insight onto the Eagles as they stand? Are they a very legitimate undefeated team? Do you feel like there were a couple of games that they went the wrong way, things would be different? Or do you think that they're just the powerhouse in the NFC?
I mean, they're the best team in NFC. Like you guys were saying, in terms of the offensive line, that's what makes everything go. But in terms of the quarterback, he's much improved from his throwing mechanics to the way he sees the game to the speed of his delivery. The running back, Miles Sanders, is running like, he wants a new contract. They have 2 alphas at wide receiver, 4 really good wide receivers, one of the top 3 tight ends in the game. So from an offensive perspective, there's not much they can do wrong. There's always a discussion to be had with how they play defense and things of that nature. But from an overall team standpoint, they're legit and they're as good as you'll see.
So, Kyron, looking back to your days following Jalen Hurts at Alabama, what do you think is the biggest thing that he's improved on over the course of his collegiate and pro career?
Probably just it's hard to say he improved on anything drastic. It's just repetition, like his timing, his rhythm, the way he's in control. But he's always been in control. Like if you follow him over the course of his career, it's just who he's been. He kind of started off a little bit slow at Bama. Then by the time he left Alabama, he was a 2-time SEC Player of the Year. He had already been SEC Freshman of the Year. He'd been to 2 national championship games. He goes to Oklahoma, replicates production tenfold, has one of the best college quarterback seasons we've ever seen. He gets his first season starting last year. They end up in the playoffs, and they had their chances in that playoff game. They could have made something happen a little bit if they took care of the ball better, and didn't give up as many explosive plays on defense. But now you're seeing them take another step. Offensive line is back another year. They go out and get Devontae Smith in the draft the year prior. They go out and get A.J. Brown. They build in a little bit more around him, and then you're seeing the fruits of that labor. I think Jalen Hurts is who he always has been. He's a hard worker. He's always going to improve. So the things that he's already good at, I think he just got exponentially better at because he just works that hard. But yeah, like that's my biggest thing with Jalen Hurts. I think this is who he always was. And when you surround guys like this with talent, this is what happens.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they do have a loaded roster, and I'm a big fan of how Howie Roseman's put everything together. So,
DM of the year, baby.
Yeah, I think this year it'd be hard to give it to anybody else. You can make a case, but he's just pulling talent wherever he can. And the biggest reason I'm such a fan of what he does is that he is not all in on any given year. He's very comfortable moving back in the draft, trading picks to accumulate more value down the line. And again, we're going to see that bear its fruits next year as well. You know what I mean? They just keep setting themselves up for the benefit of future talent coming in. And I'm a big fan of that. I think that it takes a lot of patience. He's been there a long time. He's been through a lot in that role, but I think, he's learned, and I think he's doing a phenomenal job. One of the best. He's definitely in the top 5, probably in the top 2 or 3 front offices, the way that they do things there. So, I would be excited for the long term if I was an Eagles fan as well. If we're looking at the offense and we have the addition of A.J. Brown, we have Devontae Smith coming back for another year, we have Dallas Goedert getting his extension, we've got Miles Sanders coming up and hopefully getting a payday from somebody soon, whether it's from the Eagles or elsewhere. I mean, they are just loaded. Kyron and I previewed the offensive line before the season, and I think both of us put them somewhere in the top 2 or 3. Actually, I think that maybe we put them at the top 1. I can't remember exactly what our rankings were going into the season, but it was close. And so it's just loaded. Defensively, they go out and they add a guy like Hassan Reddick. Excellent addition. Situational pass rusher, can also do some other stuff as well. They bring in Jordan Davis. I think, everybody was criticizing Howie for not caring about the linebacker position. Goes out and hits on the 3rd round with I forgot what's his name again. Georgia, Nakobe Dean. And then, just casually last minute signs James Bradbury in free agency and makes a trade for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So, at this point, where is the weakness on this roster, if you can find one?
Probably the punter and that defensive tackle at times. I mean, if you can call it that way. So we'll take out the punter. But, Jordan Davis was through the first, 6 or 7 games. He was a huge reason for the sustained run defense. So I think, once you've seen him slip out, you're starting to see teams be able to gash them. So I think from a run defense standpoint, that's probably the only weakness. I think the signing that James Bradbury took away any weakness in the secondary, and it's probably the biggest signing of this offseason. So I think if there's one thing that teams can look at that can have success, is that you can probably run the ball up the middle. And with Jonathan Gannon not wanting any deep plays or anything like that, he's going to move his guys back. He's going to allow you to accumulate some yardage as long as you don't score or get any big plays.
Yeah, so Kyron, if you're trying to face this team, what is your game plan? Because at this point, we haven't seen anything be effective enough to walk away with a win.
Well, the thing with them is they allow 321 yards a game of offense.
Correct.
But they only allow 16 points scored. So the thing that you have to focus on when you play the Eagles is red zone offense. You're going to be able to move the ball a little bit. It's just a product of how they play defense. Bend, don't break, get you behind the chains, then get off the field on 3rd downs. I think if the Commanders are able to be creative in the red zone and score touchdowns instead of field goals, they'll have a chance. So my emphasis would be being creative in the red zone offense, but I don't necessarily think they have the personnel to do that. I think they're in a tough spot here because they're just going to have to grind it out and hopeful that Gibson and Brian Robinson are able to just run the ball on the interior like Erby was talking about, because that's their best shot for their personnel.
Yeah. Well, in this particular game, I'm not sure how much of a chance they have. And I think the 11-point spread reflects that, and it's any given Sunday or any given Monday, I guess. But still, we look at the way that the Commanders are put together. They're not talentless. They're probably better than a lot of people would realize if they're not watching the games week to week. But I think at this point, it's kind of, I'd be pretty hard pressed to lay out a pathway for the Commanders to win this game. But, if you do think that there is something that the Commanders could do to potentially come away with a shocking win in the division, what do you think that might be, Glenn?
I think like what you guys were just talking about in terms of them running the ball, the better you run the ball, converting 3rd downs, at that point, you're able to keep Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense off the field. So that becomes a strategy in its own. But definitely running the ball, target Terry McLaurin. You can't not target Slay. So I understand Slay is really good, but him and Taylor Heineke have a pretty good chemistry. They have 3 really good receivers, Avonte Maddox to be out. So also, depending on where they line Jahan Dotson up in the slot or in the outside, he or Curtis Samuel could have an advantage over Josiah Scott. So there are holes and there are plays to be made. The Commanders just need to make them.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, how do you feel about Heineke? Because I've talked to Nick at length about Heineke, but Kyron, what are your thoughts on him as a starting quarterback?
I think he's sufficient. I mean, you look at his track record. He keeps them in ball games, and he's won a lot of ball games with them. I mean, I don't know if people remember. He looked Tom Brady in his eye there in the playoffs in 2020. Like, that was a very close game, bro. Like, he brought them back,
Right.
and they were in a position to win that ball game. They're 2-1 since he's come back and started to take over the reins for that team. I don't think the spread is getting covered tonight. I think it's going to be a close football game. I just think the Eagles are just better and they control the ball better. And we got to give the Eagles some more respect. I think there's too many people just saying they're the best team in the NFC. No, they're the best team in football. They haven't trailed in the second half all season. The only team in football that can say that. You can talk about competition or whatever. It's the NFL, man. The Colts beat the Chiefs this year. I mean, we've seen bad teams beat good teams because this is the NFL and it's hard to win games. If you haven't trailed in the second half all season, you're doing something right. So I think we got to give the Eagles a little bit more respect, and I think they'll win. However, it's the NFL, man. It's a division game. It's rough. It's Monday Night Football. It'll be close. If I had to give a score prediction, I'd say like 30-21. I think that would be my final prediction. But I think Heineke's fine. He'll be able to keep them in the game, and they'll have a chance.
Hey, Noah, real quick, can you hit me with a thumbs up or thumbs down? Do we have the injury report for this game? Can you hit that on the ticker there for me? Beautiful. All right. So Carson Wentz obviously not in there. J.D. McKissick being out. I don't know if that's the hugest deal. They still have a couple of good running backs between he's the Alabama kid.
Brian Robinson
and Antonio Gibson. So that's probably a functional run game. The question is, how do we expect the offensive line of the Commanders to hold up to the defensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles? I mean, I understand that, maybe there's some susceptibility there, but I don't think that it's, a dominant trait for the Commanders either way. So if you're having to predict, like, do you think that's the pathway to win, but how realistic do you think it really is?
They're not that bad up front. Leno was pretty good at left tackle. The right tackle calls me. That'll be the position to watch. I think that interior between the guard and the center, that'll be the position to watch. But in terms of the pass blocking and things of that nature, they're not that bad. They just haven't put a full game together as a total team. But, I mean, I don't necessarily, again, because of Bradbury and Slay, Heineke doesn't scare me. I think that the idea of Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson Jr. having a really good day, them utilizing the screen game, keeping the Eagles off the field, that scares me.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'm not sure, to be 100% honest, I'm not sure exactly what else there is to preview. So what I want to do is I want to pick the game, and then I want to let you guys bring up any points that you come into the day with that you want to make. So Commanders +11 at PlayAction Pools, which is our official affiliate for Gridiron Heroics here. Do we expect, I mean, Kyron, you kind of already tipped your hand on this, but Glenn, Do you expect the Commanders to cover an 11-point spread, or do you expect the Eagles to run away with this?
No, I think it'd be closer. I'd be shocked if they ran away with it. Like I've said several times this week to different people, it's hard to win in an NFL. You got big games coming up. You'll play the same team twice. They have guys coming back. Now, they are missing 2 middle linebackers, so that could be a concern from a defensive standpoint. But in terms of how they're flowing on offense, I could see it being a 7 or 8 point game, but not necessarily the rollout that everybody's expecting, no.
Yeah, Kyron, and you can expand on your opinion if you like.
Oh, yeah. So, like I said, I'd say like 31-20 or 31-23 seems totally reasonable. I think the biggest mismatch in the game is the Eagles' skill guys against the Commanders' defensive back group. I think that's where the biggest mismatch is. And I think Devontae Smith needs some more targets. I mean, or just find a way to get him the ball more. He's open all day. I mean, the kid is literally open all day. AJ Brown's AJ Brown. You're going to get your one-on-one balls with him. And if you can take those shots, you always have to take those. But I think you got to find a way to get him the ball more, because I think that's going to be beneficial come playoff time. Make him more of a respectable threat. Get him the ball more and make people give him more attention defensively, because he warrants that. You need to be able to spread the ball around a little bit better. I don't think it's a problem, but I'm talking about projecting Super Bowl talk here. I'm talking about beating, the Giants, the Cowboys, the Bucks, the tough teams in the NFC when it's money time. I think if they start to spread the ball around a little bit more, I want to see a little bit more completeness from them offensively. on top of what they've already done, because they run the ball very well. They're very efficient in the passing game, but just starting to be a little bit more dynamic as far as their target system. So that's nitpicking. They're 8-0. Like I said, they hadn't trailed in the second half this year. But if we're going to find something to kind of pay attention to tonight, I would pay attention to that, how they distribute the ball.
That's a great point too, not to cut you off, but I think it's a situation where we'll, at some point when the team is able to take Dallas Goedert away as the tight end, that's when it'll be a concern, because I have concerns when you'll see those three guys only get targets, and then you'll see Quez Watkins and Zach Pascal go 2 or 3 games without a target, let alone a catch. So I think when a team is able to take Goedert away and he doesn't have, that guy in the middle, can he, like you said, distribute to Devontae while still targeting AJ, while distributing to Quez and those guys as well? So that is a concern, and it'll be something to watch, because you'll have situations where even though 5 guys may get a target, it'll be the big 3, and then the trickle down is none or less. So that'll be something to watch as well going forward.
So I think in this game, honestly, it's going to be really tough for the Commanders. I'm actually going to take the Eagles to cover this pretty notable spread, because what I think is going to happen is they may be able to run the ball relatively effectively in the first quarter or so, but I would not even be remotely surprised if we see a 2-touchdown performance from Hurts in the offense in the first quarter. And then that's going to really take away the opportunities to run the ball for the Commanders, because they're going to feel like they need to play catch up. They're going to start passing the ball a little bit more. And that's a really, really tough thing to do for Taylor Heinicke against the defensive back unit and the pass rush of the Eagles. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be a huge blowout. Like, I don't know if this is going to be like a 40-10 type situation. I think there's a possibility that it could get to that, but I do think that they're going to develop themselves enough of a lead that it's just going to be tough for the Commanders offense to get back within 10 points. And I wouldn't be surprised if, it's, maybe a 7 to 10 point lead throughout the game, and then as the Commanders are trying to win it at the end, we see a turnover and a field goal that kind of puts it over the limit. I think 11 points is very realistic for the Eagles to cover today. And so over the past number of weeks, as the Eagles have been winning, they've consistently been right around that number 3 spot in a lot of people's power rankings, because people have been very confident in the Chiefs and the Bills because of their quarterback situation and how established they are. But with the Bills dropping 2 games, I think that it would not surprise me at all to see the Eagles jump even over the Chiefs after a big performance on Monday night that everybody gets to watch. And I really do think that this game will probably put them in not just peak position or pole position for the NFC, but also in just people's power rankings going forward. I think it's going to be a good year for the Eagles, and I think this is just going to be another game that puts them kind of over the top in that regard. So any further thoughts that you have about this team or this matchup or anything, maybe even, because again, I think regardless of whether you think they're cover the spread or not, we do expect them to win. So maybe this game isn't like the greatest preview of all time, but if you want to use this opportunity to talk about the Eagles going forward for the rest of the season, maybe this is the time to do it. What do you think?
No, I mean, it's a good outlier to see, where they're going and where they're headed. So I think as in terms of the Commanders staying around, they have to stay within 7 to 14 early on. So that first quarter, it's going to go however it's going to go. The Eagles are going to adjust. That second quarter, the Commanders can't get blown out. And then you go from there. I think in terms of going forward, power rankings wise, they're the best team in football. I think if you stack them up against the Bills or the Chiefs on the neutral field, they win because of the secondary and because of the offensive line. So I think that'll be something to watch forward in terms of them, trying to go undefeated. That's something that, even though they're not going to talk about, that is a goal. So, looking towards, that Cowboys matchup, that'll probably be the only game they're not favored. These are all games to watch. So I think they're a really good team. If they can avoid a serious injury, they'll have a chance to go 17-0 as well. So that they're a team to watch. They're a team that'll continue to retool. And I mean, if you think about it, they'll have the Saints pick, and that could be a top 4, top 5 pick as well. So things are happening, and this won't be a one-year thing at all.
Kyron, what do you think about the Eagles going forward and their chances at an ultimate championship?
I mean, they have a great chance. I think they're the most well-rounded team in football right now. I think we can stop I know everybody just respects the Chiefs and the Bills so much, but like I've been saying this since week 5, like they're undefeated for a reason. They haven't trailed in the second half. We just got to call it what it is. I think they have a great chance, but if I'm projecting playoff, I got to stick with my original pick. I still think that nobody wants to play Tom Brady and the Bucs when it matters, especially if they're healthy, especially if they get Antoine Winfield and Akeem Hicks back healthy. We saw the way that defense was able to play yesterday. We saw the way that the offense is starting to make plays, and they're starting to figure it out. If they can add Ryan Jensen back late in the season, that would still be my pick just because I just trust them so much. I mean, until the Eagles, the same problem I have with the Bills, until you show me in the playoffs, until you sustain it and do it when it matters, I'm going to give you your respect. But if I'm projecting the wins, I still think that an NFC championship between the Bucs and the Eagles is what we will get. I think the Eagles will make it that far. But like I just said, it's just a hunch. I don't have a great football reason other than history. I just trust what I've seen from proven, experienced quarterbacks over the year. We haven't really seen a young guy break through other than Patrick Mahomes. I can't think of another one. I might be drawing a blank here, but other than Patrick Mahomes, I can't think of a young quarterback in his second or third year starting that has broken through and won the Super Bowl in the last decade. I mean, Russell Wilson,
Joe Burrow made
young.
it, so I will throw him out there. You know what I mean? And they had a chance to win that game. You said yourself that the Rams defense was the reason that they came away with it. So I think
Absolutely.
you can insert him in there.
So yeah, so I guess we'll throw him in there. But Russell Wilson was pretty young when they won the Super Bowl with the LOB. But I mean, it was the LOB, man. They blanked 8-point game against Peyton Manning. Come on now, but yeah. So my point is that I tend to go with history a little bit. I think the team is good enough to get it done, but you still have to do it when it matters.
For sure.
So, quick question: as we look forward to the upcoming draft, they will almost assuredly have a top 10 pick at this point. If not, it'll be close, but it is possible that it could be as high as 4 or 5. Now, we know that Howie is perfectly willing to trade that back and accumulate future assets, take a pick maybe in the teens somewhere with a team that does want to go up and get one of those star quarterbacks in the upcoming draft. But if there's no buyer, if there's nobody that wants to get that done, what position do you think they're most likely to go after? Do you think they're going to go after a tackle as Lane Johnson gets a little older? If a guy like Skoronski is available, do you think that they go after a guy like Jalen Carter, just solidify the interior of the defensive line? Or if a guy like Will Anderson is there, do you think that they're all in on the edge player? What do you think that they would prioritize if they kind of have their pick of the litter with that high pick?
They're going to build from the inside out, so it's going to be someone in the trenches. But I think in terms of if Will Anderson or the kid from Georgia is there, they're going to take the edge rusher, the defensive tackle all the time. I think you have Jeff Stoutland, you have the best offensive line coach in the game, you have the defense offensive line. So even though Lane Johnson is getting up there, he's probably still going to be an all-pro this season. You have Jack Driscoll behind him. You may have another season or 2 from Lane, and then you still have the second-round pick in 2024 as well. So there's time to get linemen. You got Cam Jurgens in the second round this year. But I think if you're sitting there at 3 or 4 and you have a chance to get Will Anderson with teams wanting to get the 2 quarterbacks, he's going to get the pass rusher of his dreams.
Yeah, I mean, that it does make sense. That was also my opinion, but I was curious what you think. Kyron, do you have any opposing opinion to that? I mean, as an offensive lineman, I know that you both value the offensive line, but also know how impactful a pass rusher can be. What would your take on that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think they build inside out, which is what they've historically done. I think that what you'll start to see, though, is that the Skoronski, you start to see Olu Fashanu from Penn State start to take over the tackle rankings here in a second. And I think I would probably take him over Skoronski. I think Skoronski's the prototype. I mean, he's what you've come to expect from Big Ten linemen. He'll probably be a plug and play right tackle. I don't think he's a left tackle in the NFL, but I think he's a plug and play right tackle from day one. But I think Olu has the chance to be a perennial Pro Bowl, all-pro level guy at left tackle, and I don't think that you can pass that potential up with a Jeff Stoutland at the helm. So if they're able to get a top 7 to 10 pick, I think that would be the guy. It's not the position, but the player. And I think that would be the guy, even over a Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, probably because Fletcher's getting up there. His days are probably numbered. Let's just be honest about that. He's still a very good football player, but he's not what he was. He's not able to play the amount of snaps he has. But you did draft Jordan Davis, and you're probably gonna. It's easier to go find a veteran nose guard, a veteran 3 technique to go plug and play aside Jordan Davis than it is to go find a starting left tackle or starting right tackle in the NFL. So I think that will probably be my pick, even if I don't think Will Anderson will be on the board by that point. Let's be honest about that either. But if it's in the 7 to 10 range,
depends on how high they pick. I mean,
because if it's in the 7 to 10 range, then yeah, of course. But if it's, I mean, if the Saints keep losing and they get a top 4 pick, maybe. But like I said, even still, it's much harder to find offensive linemen than it is to find defensive linemen, and that's just the truth of the matter. But who knows? I mean, they've got enough goodwill with me. Whatever they decide to do, it's worked out for them very, very well in the past. And like you said, Erby, they have Driscoll. Mailata's, what is he, 26 years old? He's still very young.
Right. That's what I was going to say. If you go tackle, I don't necessarily think you go left tackle because he just signed a new deal.
Right.
So if you do go tackle, you address it to replace Lane at some point.
Well, they're just such a proactive organization that I wouldn't surprise me at all if they do that. And then you do have the other pick. I think if you got Will Anderson on the board, it's tough because with the importance of having a rotation at the defensive line, as we've seen, the best rushing units are not just good with their first 4; they're excellent with their second unit as well. I think that if he's there, I think it will be tough to go elsewhere. I think, yeah, you're right. If he's gone, then you might want to go with the tackle just as a future pick, because they are at the point where they're so loaded where they can spend a top 5, top 10 pick and not necessarily have to start them right away. Like that's just the position that they're in, which is wild. But I think it ultimately will depend on if Anderson is available with their pick, which honestly, it could actually happen.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it just depends on what he wants to do and what you have to think. What does 2024 look like as well? Because if you have the quarterback and you still have a year left with Jalen Hurts, you don't necessarily have to give him a new deal. So depending on what teams want, Marvin Harrison Jr. will be available in 2024. There's all type of things that he can do in terms of reloading on both sides of the ball. And you have to understand with Hurts getting a new deal at some point, all these guys on 1-year deals, depending on how the cap rises, he's going to have to do something. And some of these guys are going to walk. So he's going to have to replace them anyway.
Yeah, well, also, go ahead, Kyron.
Like you said, they could also, they're in a position, the roster's so talented, they could just trade back. They could trade in and add more picks. I mean, we're talking about linemen. I think this is one of the, they're not more than 2 or 3 elite tackle prospects, but this is one of the deepest tackle drafts in a very long time. There's going to be a Broderick Jones sitting there from the University of Georgia late in the first round. There's going to be Tyler Steen from Alabama sitting there late in the first round. There's going to be a lot of guys that they can reach back and get multiple picks from. So I think that is a very realistic scenario as well, where they'll be able to trade back and still get somebody to build on that offensive line or that defensive line. There's still some very good situational pass rushers and guys that'll be good, some stand-up guys, stand-up linebackers in this draft as well. So I think that's a very realistic scenario that if I'm in the GM hat, that's probably what I would do, because the roster's so good as is. Get as many guys as you can and load up like that. But they'll be fine regardless of what they decide to do, because the roster's already that good and that young. They're pretty young on the offensive side of the ball right now.
Correct.
Yeah, I would consider the age of the defense as something to potentially work on as well, especially because corners, they age out of that position really, really quickly. And while neither are old per se, for their respective positions, both Darius Slay and James Bradbury are both kind of at the point where, with the volatility of performance of that position, you're like, maybe you get 2 years more out of both of them. Maybe next year's a major drop off for either one. You know what I mean? So grabbing a corner that might develop in the system is also a potential possibility, especially if you do trade back, because I know that they like to build up front. But if you trade back and you have extra picks, that's a great opportunity to add a corner in there. All right, Glenn.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that's a great point too, because, with Bradbury leaving and Slade up there in age, one of those guys leave, this defense turns into what it was last year. So like I just said, it's the defense is what it is because of the 2 solid corners. So that's the position they could address as well when you start talking about Kilo Ringo and things like that. So they have options with the picks.
Yeah, and it's not a bad corner class either. I mean, I haven't really deep dived it, but I know that there's at least a few guys who are worthy of a first round pick coming up.
You're right.
But Glenn, I appreciate you coming on the show very much. And generally the way we structure it is we usually have somebody come on from the primetime games of the week. So
Okay.
I do believe that the Eagles have at least one more primetime game coming up. And if not, I wouldn't be surprised if they're flexed into one at this point because they're kind of a big ticket. So, but
I know the matchup with Green Bay is in prime time. I'm not sure about Dallas, but they'll definitely have one or two more. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
yeah, absolutely. So why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and your work? Of course, the managing editor of Eagles Wire, and they can follow you on Twitter, follow you wherever you put out written work, and we'll see you soon.
For sure. You can find me at the Eagles Wire at eagleswire.usatoday.com. On Twitter is the cover 2 at NFL. And we're just talking Eagles Commanders, and then we'll start to look to next week and the week after that, and we'll look towards Dallas. So I appreciate you guys having me on. Hopefully I can come back on.
My pleasure. I do expect to have you back on if you want to join us. So we'll talk to you
Without
soon.
a doubt. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
All right. Kyron, that's going to do it for today. Good show. We will be back on Sunday. I think we'll talk about that off air, but at worst, we will be back on Monday to recap the week 11 of the NFL slate again. But till then, let everybody know where they can find you.
At Kyron Samuels, and then follow me on Twitter, then you'll get everything else. So just follow me there, and we'll get everything else handled. But last thing I'll say before I sign off, I forgot it. I want to get it, sneak it in. Saquon Barkley should be in everybody's top 5 MVP candidates right now. He's been that good. The Giants are sitting at 7-2 because of Saquon Barkley. He has over 1,100 scrimmage yards in 9 games right now. He is their offense for the most part. Got to give him some more love. Shout out to Saquon Barkley.
Okay. All right, man. Appreciate you. Big shout out to Noah Ashley, our producer. Can't do this without you, man. Thank you very much. You can follow him at Noah Ashtray Sports on Twitter. And we will be back officially on Thursday with Nick Merriam.